Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to talk about mouthwash and how it might be complicating your cardiovascular health a little bit. So if you are at risk for cardiovascular complications in your health, or maybe there's a loved one, you're going to want to see this. If you have ever taken antibiotics or smoke, or maybe take PPIs, proton pump inhibitors for like acid reflux or GERD or anything like that, then you also want to see this. So the reason being is because all of those things impact our bodies when it comes to our nitric oxide levels. And I've talked about this a couple of other times in the past, but I thought I would go into it a little bit more deeply today, just because it's becoming such an overwhelming issue with some of the things that are going on in our world these days, and some things that are being put into our bodies. The risk for cardiovascular complications is increasing drastically. So it's definitely something that we want to take a closer look at and take very seriously if we're going to value, the quality of life that we experience here on this earth and how long we want to be here. So these are important things. So when it comes to our nitric oxide levels, this was implicated in nearly all hospitalizations over the last 2 years related to COVID. So this had a lot to do with some of the issues that people were experiencing with when they were getting sick with this type of illness. So it's a serious thing, and something that we definitely want to address in our health as much as possible. So what is nitric oxide? Well, literally it's the miracle molecule for your body. Scientists were actually awarded a Nobel Prize when they discovered it because it made such a big impact in what we know about our health and how we can manage it. So in particular, it's very important for our heart health. If you are diabetic or have or at a high risk for something like diabetes, your immune health, your brain health, our tissue oxygenation, our sexual health, our fitness, how well our wounds heal, things like that. So nitric oxide levels, we know now that it's been studied more, that it drastically drops after the age of 40. Hello. So, and when the levels are low, then you're going to be more prone to things like high blood pressure, respiratory infections, okay, erectile dysfunction, that's a big one, circulatory problems, and this is even things like as small as what we think of as hemorrhoids, okay, comes down to circulatory problems. So there's lots of things that fall under these umbrellas. Skin infections, neuropathy, cognitive decline, okay? So our body makes nitric oxide from specific foods and bacteria. So beets is a great source. It's a food that we want to be eating. Leafy greens are great for increasing our nitric oxide levels. And then you combine that with natural sunlight and a healthy oral microbiome, because it starts here in our mouth, and nasal breathing. So, that's why this brings me to the mouthwash issue. We're so paranoid with killing bacteria and killing off germs, but yet the bacteria in our mouth, our oral bacteria, is very influential in how well our body's able to make something like nitric oxide. So when we use antibiotics, okay, it kills all the bacteria, the good and the bad. When we use mouthwashes, same thing, it's going to kill everything, okay? So fluoride toothpaste is another thing that's going to interfere with your microbiome in your mouth. And it really disrupts the production of nitric oxide in our body. So this is a big one. Don't be so afraid of bacteria. When we kill, we can't always select which kind we want to kill off. The best way to address a bacterial imbalance is making sure that our good bacteria is nice and strong and making sure that our acid levels are nice and strong. One of the things that happen when we start manipulating our pH, we don't want everything in our body to be alkaline. Our mouth is supposed to be acidic for a reason, because that is what's supposed to help kill off the bad stuff. Our stomach should be acidic for a reason. So when we start manipulating these things, it creates an imbalance there. Okay, so there's a healthy way to manage good bacteria and bad bacteria, but killing everything, antibacterial, everything is not healthy for your microbiome. It starts killing off your first line of defense. Okay, this is a first line of defense. These are our skin is a first line of defense. And when everything is antibacterial, you're killing off that first line of defense, ultimately making yourself more vulnerable. So, you know, we don't want to do that. We want to address it in a healthy way. We don't want imbalances, but we also want to make sure that we're addressing it effectively. Okay, and not in a way that's going to just create lots of other problems. So nasal breathing, that's another way to increase your nitric oxide levels. If you do something called a buzz breath or a humming really loud, okay, and then a slow, full exhale, that's shown to increase nitric oxide by 1,500%. That's a lot, okay? So the way that we breathe is really important. We talk about mouth breathing, and, you know, I've talked about James Nestor and breath, right? And with mouth taping and making sure that you're breathing through your nose even while you're asleep at night. And you can retrain all of that, okay? So it's because sometimes it's something where, you know, it's just a habit that we've gotten into, and we can teach ourselves to do it differently. So these are all important things to know and to understand how much we control what we experience in our health in a lot of ways. So you can test nitric oxide levels really easily at home. And, you know, when we talk about getting these ingredients from our foods, what puts it into our food, like beets and our vegetables, it's coming from the soil. But the problem is most of our soil is not very healthy. It doesn't have the minerals, okay? It doesn't have all of the nutrients in it that will then translate to the nutrients in our food. So I'm going to talk in a little bit about a farmer that does specifically test his soil for these ingredients that impact our nitric oxide levels. So you could be eating beets if they're conventional beets, or even if they're organic beets and they were grown in soil that doesn't have these nutrients in it, then your beets are not going to have it. Your leafy greens are not going to have the nutrients that they need to have in order for them to have the same impact in your health. So that's why we're always talking about quality of your food. It does, you know, your dozen eggs that are 99 cents a dozen on sale at the grocery store. Not sure that they are anymore, but at one time they were, you know, they're not going to have the same nutrients as eggs that came from chickens that roamed in the backyard and had access to sunlight and were eating the bugs. Okay, they're not going to contain the same nutrients. Well, your vegetables are the same way. If they're not grown in a way that, you know, allows them to absorb all of these nutrients, then you're not going to have the same impact. Okay, so how something is grown and treated, whether it's with pesticides and herbicides and things like that, think of the same thing, you know, like antibiotics and how harmful they are for our microbiome because they're killing everything, the good and the bad. A lot of times when we treat our soil in specific ways, we're having the same impact. So let's talk about testing at home. So this is a company, I'm going to put a link to their information, a link in the comments here. And I'm going to share some of this information with you too throughout the day. But these are the test strips. Let's see if I can get it, because I'm sitting in front of the window to try and get some sunlight. There we go. So these are test strips that you can get. Let's see, is this bottle one I've opened yet? No, I haven't opened this one yet. Open. Okay. So you can see them. Okay. So there's a little pad on the end. Okay. So you can test your levels first thing in the morning when you get up. Okay. See where your color ranges. Okay. And then you can take your nitric oxide supplements. Let's see if I can get that on a good angle. There we go. There you can kind of see it there. A little bit. Take your supplement. 90 minutes later, you can test again and you'll be able to see how it impacts your levels, okay? So this is not to say don't eat leafy greens, not to say don't eat beets. Absolutely eat all of these good things. But like I said, there's a lot of things that are impairing our body's ability to do this. And we know, like I said, after 40, this declines drastically. So it impacts so many processes in our body. We really want to make sure that we're getting lots of natural sunlight because that's part of the process for us to nasal breathing, supplementation, especially if you're over 40, or if you have cardiovascular issues. Let's say you have high blood pressure. Let's say you have other symptoms that could be indicators, diabetes, that kind of thing, immune respiratory issues. They could be symptoms that are trying to tell you, hey, I'm struggling in this area. So maybe start off with some test strips and see where you're at. But most likely, if you have those conditions, this is at least one piece of the puzzle. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to solve everything that's contributing to that condition for you. However, it's definitely going to be a piece of the puzzle, right? So I'm going to share with you a link to where you can sign up as a client for the site so you can start ordering some of these things yourself if you're interested. If you want to get the test strips, if you want to get the test strips and the supplements, that's great. So it's something that is going to help you in all of those areas. I would definitely be careful of anything antibacterial putting in your mouth, toothpaste, mouthwashes, things like that. And make sure that you're taking care of that very, very well. And I'm going to start, I'll post some images too on here so you can get, some more information. And there's actually a really good video too. So who can benefit from something like this? Well, anybody that's aging, anybody over the age of 40, anybody with circulation issues, diabetics, if you have low energy, any type of sexual dysfunction, antacids, and anybody diagnosed with any kind of vascular dysfunction, anybody interested in just preventing illness and disease, this is great. So I'm going to include some of the images here throughout the day. I'm going to include more information on this, well, actually the next day or two. So things like oil pulling or toothpaste, because oil pulling is great. And in the past, we didn't know as much. I mean, that Nobel Prize that I referred to, that was just 1998. So we didn't know a lot about this in our body. And recently with all the respiratory concerns, more and more research has been done and we're learning more and more about this. So we weren't always aware fully of how things like, mouthwash impacted our body's ability to make this naturally. So oil pulling is a great practice, but you want to use things that are not going to impact your microbiome. So like, for example, coconut oil is going to impact your microbiome. So it's not a great oil pulling. And I know in the past we thought, yes, we know oil pulling has its benefits, and we thought coconut oil was a better, and it is a better option, but it's not the best. So now we're learning that for something like oil pulling, olive oil would be better instead of coconut oil if you're someone that practices that or that you're looking to practice that. Also, sometimes in our toothpaste or even in our oil pulling solutions, I know I used to make my own toothpaste and I would put cinnamon in it for the antibacterial properties, not knowing yet the impact that made on the microbiome of my mouth in pairing this process. So instead of things like cinnamon and clove and cilantro, instead try to use like peppermint oil, fennel oil if you're doing it for breath purposes. You could do 2 drops of peppermint oil, 1 drop of fennel oil, and you can just do those with water and use that as a mouthwash, okay? And that would be a better option than doing something like your cinnamon, your clove, your cilantro, and your coconut oils, which is, which was the standard up until now, or thought to be a better option because of the, antibacterial properties in it. So when you're eating your food, some foods that are typically higher in nitrates, so things like arugula is higher, bok choy, spinach, Swiss chard, celery. If they're grown in good soil, then these are going to be very, very high in nitrates, which is going to translate into your body having what it needs to make the nitric oxide. So That's very high. And I'll post a chart to this too, so you can see it. And then for high, you're looking at red beetroot, radishes, mustard leaf, fennel. Okay, these are very high. In the medium category, you have things like turnips, carrots, green beans, cabbage, leeks. Low, but still present, broccoli, cucumber, cauliflower. And then your very low, but again, still present, is onions, garlic, tomato, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, and peas. So I'll post an image to that too. So like I said, you know, something that's missing in our crops because it's missing in our soil is nitrates, which is what we use to make nitric oxide. So you know, we don't rotate our crops usually like we're supposed to, and then we're using herbicides. And even if it's organic crops, you know, they're replenishing this, if they're not replenishing the soil with some type of nitrogen based fertilizer, it's going to be missing from the food, even in an organic environment. So there is this farm, it's called the Chef's Garden, and they're the ones that do the testing in their soil, and they do home deliveries. So if you have a local farm that you like to use that is organic, or at least, you know, maybe not certified organic, but follow organic practices that you like to order from, talk to them about their soil and ask them if it's ever tested in that way, so that if they ever do any type of soil analysis, ask them if they rotate their crops. Okay, there's even a specific time that you can harvest the food to make sure that it has the optimal nutrient density, and that these vegetables will have the highest amounts of nitrates in them. So so that's important. So what else can we do, especially with oral health being such a big factor in this process? You know, we talked about the mouthwash, and the fluoride toothpaste is not so great, you know, because we rely on that good bacteria for metabolism of these nutrients, especially nitrates. So that's why it has such a big impact. One thing that will promote healthy bacteria in your mouth is tongue scraping. I've talked about this many times in the past. Using a tongue scraper after you brush your teeth is very, very helpful here. As stomach acid, you know, when you're using antacids, there's a root cause. The need for antacids, I had GERD, okay? So I get the problem. Started out with, you know, acid reflux and worked my way up to GERD and, you know, upper endoscopies and all these fun things that I had to do. I didn't know any better, took antacids for a long time, was on medication for a long time for it. Had no idea that that was just a symptom of something, a deeper dysfunction. And I could heal that deeper dysfunction to eliminate the issue, and then not harm all of these other processes. You know, we need stomach acid. We need it to absorb our nutrients, things like B vitamins, iron. If our stomach acid isn't where it needs to be, we're not going to be able to absorb these things. Selenium, zinc, lots of talk about zinc the last few years. You're not going to be able to absorb it if you have stomach acid issues. So if you're taking antacids, you're not going to absorb it. Even if you supplement it, you're going to have an issue. Okay. Getting your vegetables and your food from a reliable source, something like the Chef's Garden, and I'll post a link. And then you can supplement, you know, in addition to that healthy diet and lifestyle practices, to make sure that you're getting the levels that you need to sustain your health. So hopefully you found that helpful. Like I said, the next day or so, I'll post some of these images and some of these links, so that you can continue to follow that and even order it yourself if you would like to start using the test strips to monitor yourself, and then the supplements to supplement all these great practices. So I'll see you all.